Hello and welcome to History Cupboard, the show in which I delve into the dustier corners of history and unearth interesting facts and people from the past. I'm Angus Donald, and today I'm going to be talking about 10 things you probably didn't know about the Mongols. I've been doing a lot of research on the Mongols recently. This is my latest book, Templar Traitor, which is about an Englishman who fought for Genghis Khan. It's available from Amazon in paperback, ebook, audiobook, and it's the basis of the research. The research that I've done for that book is the basis of this talk. Okay, 10 things you probably didn't know about the Mongols. Number one, they were tolerant of all religions. Despite their fearsome reputation, the Mongols, or the great Genghis Khan, didn't care what you believed in, what gods you worshipped, and you were free to do and worship anything you like, in stark contrast to Christendom, where heretics were burned to the stake. You could do whatever you liked, you could worship whatever you liked in Mongol realms. Genghis Khan himself worshipped the eternal blue sky of the steppe, Tengri it was called, but he allowed Muslims, Buddhists, Christians, animists to worship freely in his realm. Members of his own family were in fact Christians. His daughter-in-law, Sorkotani, a very powerful woman who was married to his youngest son, Toluai, was a Christian of the Church of the East, or sometimes called Nestorians. She had 4 sons, all of whom became Great Khan, and she raised them to be tolerant of religions. Sorkotani actually built a madrasa, a Muslim school in Bukhara, and she gave money, arms to both Christians and Muslims during her life. So they were very tolerant of religions. Number 2, they were democratic. Well, sort of. In Western Europe, the eldest son of the king would inherit the throne most times. But in the Mongol society, it was the youngest son of the Great Khan who was the most likely to be considered his heir apparent, but not always. In fact, each Great Khan had to be elected by votes from the other Khans and the senior generals of the Mongol army. Toluai, who was the youngest son of Genghis Khan, called a Kurultai after Genghis Khan's death to see who would be the next Great Khan, and he was made regent for 2 years, and then actually they called another one, and they decided that Great Khan should be Ogadai, the second son. So it was an election process, sort of democratic. Not, they weren't completely democratic, but they voted for who was in charge. The Mongols were a society on the march. When the Mongols threatened Western Europe in the beginning of the 13th century, chroniclers of the time thought that they numbered 1,000, i.e. 1 million, but there were far fewer Mongols than this. And an army of 1 million strong is impossible in those days. It's pretty impossible now. But the reason for this mistake was that the Mongols travelled with their herds. Each Mongol trooper had up to 9 horses. They would also have their wives and children, and their goats and sheep and camels. And so a tumen of, say, 10,000 Mongol warriors, which was a sort of small army, would have 3 times that number of women and children and 10 times that number of animals with them. So the dust cloud they produced would be enormous. And this was not a disadvantage, because actually the enemy saw this huge multitude coming and were terrified. It looked like 1 million men coming at you. Anyway, they were the masters of logistics. This is number 4. Medieval army is a cumbersome thing. As it moves across the land, it needs to feed itself, and you've got 2 ways of dealing with that. One is to bring the food and the fodder for the animals with you, your horses, and the other, which is incredibly difficult, you've got to have wagons, you've got to have oxen, you've got to have fodder to feed the oxen, and there's a great danger in all medieval armies of starvation. The Mongols, on the other hand, because they travelled with their horses and their sheep and their goats, brought their food source, they lived on milk and meat basically, with them. So they could be self-sufficient. They could go wherever they liked, and they'd always have food and drink. In extremis, they would even cut the legs of their horses and drink the blood of the horses mixed with a little grain or something as some protein. And these horses were incredibly tough. They were steppe ponies, ugly but tough. And they would scrape away snow in the winter to eat the grass and the moss and stuff underneath it. So the horses were as tough as their riders. So yes, so they were self-sufficient. They were not invincible. When the Mongol army arrived in Europe, which is the beginning of my book Templar Traitor, they were considered invincible. They thrashed all the Russian dukedoms. They'd beaten the Hungarians in pitched battle and the Poles a few days later, also in a pitched battle, and it looked like they were about to run over Western Europe. But this is what everybody was thinking, but they were wrong, because actually they required the steppe, and the steppe stops in Hungary. It doesn't go any further west. So while they were on the steppe, they could feed their horses, they could travel around, they could feed their herds, they were fine. But if they had to go into the more mountainous bits of Western Europe, I don't think they would have triumphed over the combined strength of Western Europe. The Mongols had excellent long-distance communications. This is number 6. Genghis Khan set up a troop of riders called arrow riders, so called because they were said to travel as fast as a speeding arrow, and another system called the Yam system, which was staging posts every 15 to 40 miles on all the roads over his domain, so that the arrow riders could ride 20 miles, stop at a Yam station, get a fresh horse, jump on the fresh horse, and carry on. And this system meant that a message could travel between 200 and 300 miles in one day, and that is incredibly fast for medieval communications. They had nothing like that in Western Europe, and in fact it wasn't equaled until the Pony Express in America's Wild West in 600 years later. So it was very advanced. They also had really good communications on the battlefield. They developed a system of flags, a bit like semaphore, where they would wave a flag in a particular way, a particular coloured flag, and that would mean advance, retreat, go round the left, or full steam ahead. They also had little tubes tied to arrows that, when fired, would make a whistling sound, and that could give basic orders such as advance, retreat. So they were really good on the battlefield and over large periods of large areas of territory. Okay, number 7. The Mongols had no written language. Given the vast areas under their control in the 13th century, 9 million square miles at their peak, the largest contiguous empire the world has ever seen, it's surprising that the Mongols could not write. So how on earth did they manage to control it, to organise it? And the answer is that they brought in a lot of Chinese clerks who were literate. Once they'd conquered parts of China, they imported a lot of Chinese clerks, and later Persian and Arab civil servants as well. And they formed this incredibly efficient civil service, which could run on Uyghur script. So they would give the orders, or they would speak in Mongol, and it'd be written down in the Uyghur script, which is a completely different vertical script. And then it would be passed on, and another Mongol commander could read this Uyghur thing and understand what the other guy was saying. So this civil service was very efficient, and it ruled this vast area and kept control and raised taxes and basically efficiently ran it. Number 8. 1 in every 200 men is descended from Genghis Khan. This has been going around the internet for a while, so it may not be quite so surprising as you'd think. DNA research done back in 2003 into Y chromosomes in men found that 16 million men worldwide were direct descendants of Genghis Khan. That's 0.5% of the male population, which was 6 billion in 2003. It's now 8 billion. In Asia, apparently between Uzbekistan and northern China, 8% of all men were descended from Genghis Khan. I should say here that this figure has not been conclusively proven by genetic testing with known members of the Golden Kin, as the family of Genghis Khan were known. Basically, Genghis Khan had 4 sons and probably 5 daughters from with his wife Borta, but he also had hundreds of concubines captured in war and raped. And it's estimated that he had 1,000 illegitimate children. And in fact, this huge sort of bloodline is not as unusual as it might seem. In 8th century Europe, we had Charlemagne, and he had 18 sons, and geneticists reckon that literally everybody with European ancestry is related to some extent to the great medieval king of the Franks. So that's just how genetics works. Number 9, Mongols ruled India until the 19th century. A nobleman called Baba, a warlord from Uzbekistan, came down into India, and he was a descendant of both Genghis Khan and Timur the Great, and he defeated the Sultan of Delhi in 1526 and conquered northern India and set up the Mughal Empire. Mughal is a form of the word Mongol. His family ruled for the next 300 years. The last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, was deposed by the British in 1857, marking the beginning of the British Raj. And last but not least, Mongol battle tactics were taught into the 20th century, hundreds of years after mass archery and swarms of self-sufficient light horsemen became obsolete. The basic principles of Mongol warfare, high mobility, combined arms, intelligence and deception, and psychological warfare were taught in Russian military schools up to the beginning of the First World War. And indeed, aspects of Mongol strategy are still studied in military academies today. So those are your 10 things. This is my book, Templar Traitor, which is based on the true story of an Englishman who fought for Genghis Khan, which is where I've got the research. It's available on Amazon. Thank you very much for listening to my show, and goodbye.